All right. So I want to thank everyone for joining today for our application integration fundamentals workshop. So I'm also joined by a few of my colleagues. So my name is Christopher Duncan, and what we're going to do here is do some quick introductions in regards to the Google team here to talk about our product. So my name is Christopher Duncan. I'm a customer engineer here at Google Cloud, and I primarily specialize in Apigee and application integration solutions. And Austin and Pramod, did you want to go ahead and do a quick introductions?
Hey everyone, Austin Murtha. I'm a customer engineer, also focusing on Apigee and application integration. Thanks again for joining us today. I hope this is a very useful event for you.
Hey, I work alongside with Chris and Austin and the rest of the team, do products for application integration. And thanks for your time, and excited to have this session with all of you.
And so we're also joined by Purnima Diman. She's also going to be supporting us from a moderator perspective. I'm not sure if you want to do a quick introduction as well, Purnima. All right, so we should be good to go, actually. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about the agenda for today. So we're going to do a quick introduction into what application integration is, our new iPaaS product that's actually been GA since July of earlier this year. And then we're going to do a quick overview of it holistically and talk about some of the capabilities. And at the end of the discussion, we're going to have we're going to have a demo in regards to some of our AI capabilities in application integration. And we're also going to have a hands-on lab for some of the students or individuals that joined to also conduct the lab as well. At the very end of this, we're also going to have some feedback and Q&A. So during the session, feel free to ask questions while we're talking as well inside of the chat. We do have some moderators like Purnima and a few other Googlers as well here to support you and be able to answer those questions. And we're also going to be answering questions throughout the lab as well. So with that being said, before we begin, if you would like to conduct the lab, for the individuals that have already signed up for this particular event before, you're just simply going to navigate to googlecloud.quicklabs.com. You're going to sign up for an account with the same email you use to register for this event, whether that's your work email or your personal email. And then in part 2 of that, you're going to follow the instructions to do the email verification when you're setting up your account. And the third part of that is just logging into the platform. So once you log into the Google Cloud.quicklabs platform, you should see the lab there itself. I would say hold off on starting the lab until we all started together, because I'm going to be working with you throughout the lab as well. So let's go into this. Let's talk about application integration. So organizations have more SaaS applications than ever. And what we've realized through a lot of discussions through various organizations and different engagements, that point-to-point integration doesn't scale, right? And so what we see day in and day out as customer engineers here at GCP, we see organizations coming to us trying to figure out how can they connect their applications to different applications. So there are a lot of organizations today that have SaaS applications. There are organizations that have a number of SaaS applications, and those SaaS applications have to connect into some of the newer applications that particular organization is creating. And there are also legacy systems that these organizations have that may need to connect into some of the SaaS or new innovative created applications inside of an organization. But you can obviously see that can't scale, right? So what we've seen is that more than 500 applications are deployed on average in any organization today. And that makes the scale very questionable in how you can achieve that. So Google, we really wanted to decide to make our in-house integration capabilities available as a product for our customers. And so just like a lot of the Google Cloud solutions that you're going to see, a lot of the things that we use in-house at Google, we wanted to productize that and make that available to our customers. So application integration is our iPaaS platform that we've made publicly available as of this past summer. And there's 4 key talking points there. So the key talking point number 1 is the visual integration designer. So in the past, what organizations would do to be able to connect to different applications is they would have a set of integration developers or a software engineer, and they would they would come up with some level of code to connect to that particular application, right? So to connect different applications together, of course, there are different protocols and different things there. And so you have to think about it from a perspective where that's not scalable. You're only going to have certain individuals in the organization that understand that code base. And if those individuals leave the organization, they're leaving with that level of knowledge, even if they pass that down, right? So having a integration designer and having an intuitive drag and drop interface not only makes it easier from a advanced coding perspective and being able to manage some level of code, but also being able to build your integration flows quickly and easily with a intuitive drag and drop interface makes things a lot easier for organizations that have baseline integration needs. Now, if you want to have more advanced use cases, we do offer an API with application integration outside of the user interface itself. So that can be for more advanced use cases where you do want to have some level of programming involved. Part two of that is the plug and play connectors, right? So out of the box with our platform, if you look at our documentation, we offer 75 plus built-in connectors to integrate across any data source, any of the Google Cloud services that you see listed on our site, as well as some third-party services like Salesforce or Oracle databases or SAP. And we also have more than 50 plus private preview connectors you can also see on our documentation to give you some more insight in regards to our integration roadmap for some of the other capabilities we're currently trying to add into the platform. Part three of that is versatile tasks and transformations, right? So being able to address any use case with minimal effort. So you being able to have different tasks to handle different business logic that you build into your integration, and transformations to support you in regards for an application that may speak in JSON and may need to talk to another application in XML, or doing some level of transformation with the data at a data mapping layer, which you're going to see in the lab as well. And then the last part I want to highlight is the fact that it's a cloud native managed service, right? So a lot of organizations, they may build their own integration systems themselves, or they may use other competitive solutions itself. What makes this platform very useful for organizations is the ability to seamlessly have a managed service that's managed by Google. And the only thing that the customer has to worry about is the shared responsibility model that they have for the solution in GCP. What essentially means what security controls you want to put in your integrations, whether you want to have role-based access controls or being able to have some level of networking capabilities you want to introduce into the solution. So let's talk about how does application integration work? I'm doing a lot of talking about some key points, but let's really highlight how this works inside of our solution before we showcase some of the key capabilities and have Austin speak about some other areas. So imagine you have two applications. You have one on the left and one on the right, and how you want these applications to speak to each other. So application integration would essentially sit in between those applications to connect them. Very straightforward. So one of the terminologies I'm sure most of you are familiar with is middleware. So that it's more like a middleware capability in that sense. And so a part of that is being able to have different capabilities to allow your integration to connect to that particular application. So we have the concept of triggers. And what essentially a trigger is it's essentially an execution point or an entry point into your integration to essentially kick off some of the tasks that you've configured in your integration to connect downstream to that particular application. So we have various triggers that would work in line with your integration. We have API triggers. We have Cloud Pub and Sub Trigger, which can work in line from a messaging queue perspective, where if a message comes in, it automatically kicks off the integration to do some level of business logic you've put into the platform. Change Data Capture, which works in line for Salesforce. So we do have a Salesforce trigger that works in line there. And then Cloud Scheduler or a schedule trigger, we do have built into the platform as well. If you wanted to have an integration execute at a certain time of the month, let's say, for instance, if you wanted to work with some files and upload a file to a GCS or a cloud storage bucket, maybe once a month with some data from your organization, you can set a schedule on that aspect and save on costs. And then also we have manual capabilities there for your integration itself, where you can manually click that in the UI. Then let's talk about the orchestration piece, right? So if your integration executes or your trigger automatically gets executed via an event that comes into the integration, then you have an orchestration method, right? So this application may speak in one particular language or protocol, whereas this application on the right-hand side may speak in a different language, right? So as I mentioned, let's say, for instance, they speak in JSON and this particular application speaks in XML. How do you map the data, right? How do you orchestrate that data transformation to be able to speak to each other? And so we have capabilities in regards to data mapping, which will allow you to massage that data, orchestrate that data, and being able to map it to the particular data type that it needs to be to reach the backend system, and being able to create variables in different levels of business logic or flows at the data mapping layer to support this overall architecture. And then, of course, we have the ability to filter the information inside of your integration, merge your information. Let's say, for instance, you wanted to merge two JSON constructs together as an example. And then being able to log and monitor your integration holistically is some of the key capabilities that you have to have in a solution, especially managed by Google. Then the last piece of that is the connector, right? Being able to connect to these particular applications. So as I mentioned before, we have out of the box Google services that your integration can connect to natively, but then you may have a use case where you want to connect to an Oracle database outside of Google, or being able to connect to a database that's in an on-premise environment in your on-prem environment at your organization today. And then there are also prospects of messaging queues that you may want to connect to as well. And then other SaaS applications that may be something that you're targeting, i.e. like a Salesforce or a ServiceNow or a Zendesk. So with that being said, and I'm going to go ahead and hand off the reins to Austin right after this, we really talk about integration life cycles with organizations that come to us to be able to address this. Being able to understand every point of the life cycle of an integration as it's created in your organization. So whether that's from the design stage, when the integration is being designed to address a business use case, being able to develop it and introduce different levels of business logic and different capabilities there in that integration, and then being able to connect to the different data source that you want to connect to. And then, of course, a part of that, being able to test that integration at scale and have that work in line with your SDLC at your organization, and being able to deploy it to production to take production level traffic. And the last piece of that, of course, is monitoring that to a high degree. And there are different methodologies we're going to talk about throughout the session itself, from a CI/CD perspective, or being able to build your environments. But holistically, the application integration lifecycle is something that's very important that organizations are looking for. So go ahead, Austin. Feel free.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. So let's jump into a couple of the capabilities at a deeper level. So application integration provides a number of benefits, right? It's low code and it's extensible. So we want to reduce time and get these integrations set up as quickly and easy as possible. And we also want to maintain them over time, right? The idea isn't to build something heavy that you have to update and that you have to keep working with. We want to take that burden off of your shoulders and do that for you. It's cloud native, so full reliability and scale and operations on our side. It's agile in the sense that we can, again, deliver this value quickly, but we also have that integration capability that you need across Salesforce, SAP, et cetera, right? And then we want to make sure that it's available anytime, anywhere with any app with high quality data. So whether, again, that's within GCP or some other system, we want to make sure that that access is controlled and secured in the manner in which you want it to be. We have these three kind of core pillars as we look at the application. We want to make sure that the platform and operations team has what they need. Again, global availability, security controls, so that only the right folks can come in and create integrations and test the things that they can test. We want to make sure that this can scale, so that when you build this out and you have a successful program, again, that those SaaS-like features where it can just go all the way to the scale it needs to be for your business, as well as automation with CI/CD. We want to make sure that this IT professional has the ability to use a visual editor and can drag and drop the data mapper, and that we have a number of triggers and capabilities that make this work within your organization. If we don't have these capabilities, then you won't be able to deploy it in the manner that's needed. And so we want to bring all of these features to the folks that are developing this. And then we want to have a robust set of connectors that can leverage the applications that you're already using today and trigger them, make updates from a database into your CRM, et cetera. here's a quick look at the developer experience. You're going to spend some time in this today in the lab, and we're really excited to how this is going to play out today. In the developer experience, you're able to drag and drop your different experience, kind of flows. And when you have these flows, you can then test all the different changes that you're making in line. So it makes it really easy for folks to understand how this is working, how the flows are moving, and what changes will take place when you put this into production. Typically this is something that can take a very long time to go through a cycle where you're going to make a change and then you need to talk to a backend developer or a middleware developer. This is something the IT developer can do right away within the view. And this makes it really, really easy for folks to get up to speed and then build quickly. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, right, if you don't have these triggers and tasks, then the process isn't really beneficial. One thing I did want to mention, just within the last week, we added RabbitMQ and IBM MQ to this list from a trigger perspective. We also have Salesforce, API trigger, PubSub, et cetera. As Chris mentioned, we're constantly building and expanding the list of triggers that we have, as well as tasks. So based on some action, we want to be able to, create that trigger and then go do something about it, right? Whether it's in workspace or data manipulation or a database, so that, again, before the information gets to that CRM or to that system, we've made the necessary changes and added that business logic in the flow. We also, again, want to make sure these connectors provide you with the capabilities that you need, right? So authentication, endpoint configuration, data format mediation, discovery, et cetera, so that you're able to pick what you need, whether it's, again, I'll keep picking on Salesforce and, SAP or, Zapier or whatever the case may be, right? MySQL. You can pick these things, and we're going to continue to make these updates and configurations as those applications change and add new capabilities, right? So this is an example of what you can do with MySQL from a specific entity to an operation in that flow. Expanding onto that, right? So I showed kind of how the connector would work and what you can do from a key benefits perspective, but it's also important to see how many we have. So this is an updated list with the number of connectors that are available today. We have a number that are in our roadmap. So if there's one that you're interested in, please let us know. We'd be happy to jump on a call with you and kind of dive into this further. We're also constantly taking feedback from customers as to what is important in their roadmap and journey, right? So that we can make sure that it's in line with where we're focusing on from a development perspective. So you see a number of kind of like pretty common applications out there, HubSpot, Stripe, Splunk, Snowflake, Box, et cetera. And 2 more slides, and then we're going to hand it over to Pramod, and he's actually going to cover a pretty cool demo. I'm excited to see it myself, actually. But we're talking about that scale portion, right? The kind of operations perspective. And so from a monitoring standpoint, you're going to be able to see, what's happening in application integration. You can also pull in other applications like Apogee or PubSub into one view. So you can see the entire landscape of that connection and flow and understand where things are happening and why, and where there might be an issue. Also actually pull this into cloud monitoring as well. And again, that can be fully customized. So we want to make sure that not only can you build these integrations and have them be successful, but that you can monitor and manage them over time. So you're providing a really good experience for your business. This is also an important view on the logs. So I mentioned earlier in that developer view, right? When you're building these, when that IT professional gets into application integration for the first time, they want to be able to see what is happening where and have a lot of robust information. And that's what you're going to get with this logs view. We're actually going to be pulling this into Google Cloud Logging very shortly. So again, if you're using Google Cloud Logging or Splunk or some other log aggregate, you'll also be able to pull this into there as well. But again, this view is one of those differentiators of the platform, giving that robust information to you right out of the gate. And over to you, Pramod.
Hey, excellent. Thanks, Austin, and thanks, Chris, for setting up the stage. Just to summarize what you learned or what you saw, this is application integration, as the name suggests. the product does what it is our Google Cloud latest offering in the iPaaS market. So what is an iPaaS solution? An iPaaS solutions allows you to automate your business processes. Like imagine you are automating your order management, your customer service ticket resolution, all of that, which often involves integrating into different systems, right? Like because your core systems could be, say, ServiceNow, could be Salesforce, could be SAP. That's what this is actually playing into. We do have other complementary products within Google Cloud to offer a complete holistic platform capabilities. That's one of the differentiator. Like for example, often these solutions get coupled with a data integration capabilities, right? Such as ETL solutions. So if you look at Google Cloud Platform offers in a single place all the capabilities which you need with respect to integration and orchestration, be it data, be it your application, be it your business processes, all of it put together. This particular solution which you're taking a look at it is focused on application integration, which allows you to automate your business processes by integrating different applications together. So the four key takeaways which I took note of from Austin and Chris is, one is it has a great visual designer, which is what you will see it in the labs. Plug and play connectors, we have 100 plus growing as we speak, and it can orchestrate complex business logic. It is not like these APIs like IFTTTs, if then all kind of stuff, but it can actually take and route requests from one system to another system, have business logic, all of that. That's what it is actually focused on. And finally, your trust on Google. This is Google's scale, cloud scale. It is something which we have used internally. So it's already plant scale tested, right? So you could actually depend to run your business on this particular application integration. With that said, the reason why I am here, as you would have guessed, is it would be very it would be improper rather for us to end any of these slide sessions without talking about Gen AI, right? So I wanted to actually go and talk about how we are incorporating Gen AI into application integration. So you looked at how application integration through Chris and Austin's page, how it helps you to automate your business processes. Imagine how you can even automate that automation itself, right? That's the power of Gen AI. Like how could you have Gen AI assist you in actually going and generating your integration flows? Could you go describe your business requirement and ask Gen AI, in this case, the Duet AI within application integration inside Google Cloud, to help you generate the business processes, right? Like, could it actually orchestrate the business processes, put things together? That's cool, but that's not the moat. The moat or the differentiator is actually, it is not about generating from text language, natural language into a flow, but more importantly, using that in context of your enterprise, which means that it needs to understand the systems which is used within your enterprise, the APIs, the apps, all of that needs to come together to actually go and stitch it together. That's what I'm actually going to go and share it as a demo as we speak. Next, it's not just about generating the flow, right? It's also about how Gen AI could really improve your productivity, right? Be it, I'm sure I will see 100 out of 100 hands here. How many of you like to write test cases? How many of you like to write documentation of it? Nobody likes it, but it's necessary of it, right? Imagine how Gen AI could take that out of you and actually help you bring that into productivity, right? Those are all the capabilities which we have. All of this is available to you right now as part of your Trusted Tester program. We'll share the link. You should be able to go and sign it up and actually experience it yourself. Talking about experience, it's my time to actually show something about this. And I will keep it short and simple so that we could go back to focusing on the labs, but I'll just leave you with a taste that you can experience yourself as well. So with that, I will have my screen up on for you. So this is let's take a scenario. The scenario is I am a company which does food delivery. Let's say my company is called as Door Delivery is my company. Okay, I deliver food. That's what it is, from restaurants to this. I want to actually automate my processes about handling customer cases. Like whenever, so for example, I ordered a food and the food did not come on time, the food is cold or whatever reason, the customer can actually go and raise a case, right? Like, or raise an issue through the app. But I want to know, I want to automate the process of how to handle that particular case, right? That's what I'm going to actually go and show. So I'm a door delivery food app, and I have created a process here, as you could see, handle unhappy customer particularly. And immediately when you go in, this is what you will experience during the lab. This is in Canvas, drag and drop Canvas. But in this case, I'm actually going to use what we have, the Gen AI capability here, which is called as Duet AI within Google Cloud, to actually help me automate my process. The process itself is, I'm keeping it very simple for the sake of demo. When I say, I'm just going to make it sound like it's a simple process even within my door delivery. But I wanted to show the moat, right? So whenever customer raises a case through the app saying that, oh, the delivery is getting delayed, that gets raised within, say, Salesforce. Okay, but behind the scenes within the enterprise, assume that I use another app, such as it could be Jira, it could be Zendesk, it could be any other app, to actually do workforce assignment or ticket assignment or routing, all of it, right? Like, so I need to assign it to some resolution team. All of that is how my enterprise works. So here, as you could see, I'm using natural language here. I'm going to go ahead and say, create a new issue when customer creates a case in Salesforce. That's all I said. I'm very straightforward, very simple. When I click on actually generate, what it does is it actually takes my prompt and actually goes and passes it into Vertex, which is our like kind of Gen AI LLM model, and tries to understand what it is, and actually generates the particular flow required for it. In this case, it should be pretty simple and straightforward flow. That's what you see here. Nothing complex. You could actually even give complex routing, all of it in your prompt. It actually goes and gives me some explanation. In this case, I'm going to go and confirm, right? The flow itself is what I'm not trying to focus on. But more importantly, as you could see, in my prompt, I said Salesforce. I said when a case is created in Salesforce, it automatically went and created all the variables required for you to get triggered whenever a case gets created in Salesforce. Imagine doing this manually. It's just a two-step process. Imagine this going and reading Salesforce documentation and actually copying over and creating all your variables. All of that got done. Not just that. If you remember my prompt, I said create an issue, right? It actually further went one step ahead. It knows that I'm using Jira within my organization. For example, in my I have set up some connections to Jira, Zendesk, and GCS, and it understood that it does not need to go out and give you a random thing in terms of going and creating an issue. There is something called as an issue within Jira, and it actually used that to go and even configure my connector. The connector is automatically configured here. If I click on configure connector, as you could see, it used my enterprise connection already and actually did that, right? Which means that imagine now I've accelerated my steps. It's a two-step process, but you have to read your Jira documentation. You have to understand there is an object or an entity called as issue. Go and actually even it went and created the object required for issue within Jira. Right? That's what we are talking about, the power of Gen AI here. That's the coolness. Let's put Gen AI to one more test of it to make sure that the moat here in terms of the enterprise context that works. Nothing fancy again. I'm actually going to go ahead and say the same prompt. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and say create a new ticket instead of actually creating an issue, right? The reason is I'm expecting Gen AI to go ahead and tell me it should be the same process or possibly slight thing. Difference, it should be a two-step or a three-step process, which it should actually go ahead and recommend, same as what we saw last time. But in this case, because I said a ticket, I'm expecting it to be a little more intelligent to, sorry, Murphy comes into play. I'm expecting it to actually go and tell me about going and suggesting a Zendesk or other connections which is applicable within my enterprise. So that's what I'm expecting if Murphy doesn't come in between. Yeah. So cool. I'm going to click on confirm. As you could see here, again, the same Salesforce got done. That's not that we already saw. But more importantly, what it did is this time I said ticket and not an issue. What it did is it automatically went ahead and configured Zendesk for me. Because if you're aware of Jira, if you have played with Zendesk, you know that Zendesk calls the same thing called as a ticket, and Jira calls the same thing called as an issue, right? It was deep enough to actually not only understand my enterprise connections, it was deep enough to go out and understand the entities and objects within each of those connections to help you actually go out and do the automation. As I said, it is not only at one-time generation. You could actually go out and use it in various places. For example, I want to actually extend this. I could actually go out and give additional prompts for it to go out and do it. Like, for example, I'm going to go out and say, because the customer is unhappy, like they are complaining, I'm actually going to go out and order a free meal from the restaurant, right? Like that's one of the things which I'm going to actually go out and do it. So I'm expecting it to actually go out and generate. It could be complex. I could say, if this, it will automatically do a routing conditions. All of that is also possible. In this case, again, it's very simple and straightforward. It sounds very easy that it is actually or did one additional step in terms of actually going and doing it. You could actually go out and give much more complex things in terms of what the routing logic has to be. The key aspect here I'm trying to show is that it can actually not be alongside as what it is required in your journey of automating your business processes. What I'm showing to you here is, I said order a free meal from the restaurant. But what it actually also suggests to me is, okay, there is something called as place an order, a API call, which you could actually get this particular task achieved. No surprise. Where did this come from? Because I already have an API inside my API hub here within my enterprise. Imagine in your enterprise, you have a lot of APIs, and I have all of these APIs within my API hub. The Gen AI was able to go out and understand all of these enterprise context, enterprise APIs to actually suggest that, oh, why don't you use this food delivery API to actually achieve your outcome in terms of ordering your free meal, right? That's what is the coolness of it. Like I'm going to go and say, okay, this suggestion looks good. The key thing is, if you could see, it automatically updated my endpoint. It actually automatically did the post method. And let's validate if this endpoint is the right endpoint, right? If I actually click on this particular YAML, which is my API, it shows that api.example.com for delivery. Boom, right? That's the power of Gen AI. Gen AI actually took your words, translated that into your actual automation process. Beyond that, it actually also, more importantly, looked into your enterprise and not hallucinate, right? It could have said me various other things in terms of SAP, NetSuite, various other things, but it all grounded with your enterprise context. That's what I wanted to actually go and show it to you. We are possibly 3 minutes behind, but hopefully you saw the power of what Gen AI could do. There are more things in terms of you could actually use it to generate documentation. You could actually ask it to use it for your test cases, all of that in there. But I will paste the Trusted Tester link so that you could all join for it. With that said, I will try and hand it over back to Chris.
All right. Thanks, Pramod. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move into the lab portion for everyone that would like to conduct the lab itself. Being said, really appreciate Pramod talking about some of the advanced capabilities we have in the product to be able to address your integration use cases as you're building out your integrations at a baseline, but getting more advanced with some of the AI capabilities that we have in the product there. So I think this is a great product-led discussion, and I think this would be a great opportunity for us to now move into the lab portion of this particular event. So let's get set up for the lab. First, I'm going to talk about the overview of the lab first, and then I'm going to, at a high level, talk about the steps that are required to be able to get into the lab. So, as you can see on my screen, this is a high-level architecture of the lab itself. It's a very basic lab itself. And the premise of the lab is around you as an individual owning a telco organization. So imagine you are a telco organization and you offer different products and services. And as you can see on the screen right here, there are phone services that your telco organization offers to customers. And you also have internet services that you offer to customers as well. So when these customers come and they make orders for these particular services, you have an integration flow that has been built in the platform to address those orders and store that order information downstream in a Cloud SQL database, right? So as you can see on the screen here, the customer would ideally place an order. That order would be sent to an orders topic or Cloud Pub and subtopic in GCP that's configured. And then that Cloud Pub and subtopic would, of course, publish those messages, and the integration itself would subscribe to those messages as they come in from the orders from the customers, and sends it downstream based on what type of order it is and the order amount, as you're going to see in the lab. Now, in part one, you're going to design the baseline integration itself to achieve this flow. In part two, you're going to add some advanced features to your integration itself as well, where you may want to have someone inside of your telco organization to approve particular orders if the order amount reaches a certain threshold. So you could say, but hypothetically, if the order for this phone is $10,000 or more, I would like for this particular individual in my organization, usually from a good example, that's a manager, I want them to get a email that asks for them to approve this particular request, or at least review it and then approve it, and through that process. And then we're also going to talk about some other advanced features in regards to error handling that works in line with the advanced features that we were talking about in part two, where if you have different errors, how do you handle that from an integration perspective? Where if this particular phone order is sent in, but there are some issues with this particular phone order, how do you have the integration handle those errors at that point in time in your integration build? And then lastly, in part four, we're going to showcase some of the integration operations, where we are highlighting some of the capabilities like monitoring and alerting, and utilizing some of the integration APIs that we have with the platform to do things outside of the regular console that we talked about for this particular product-led discussion. So with that being said, that's the quick overview. Now, to conduct this lab, you're going to simply navigate to googlecloud.quicklabs.com, as you can see on my screen right here. So when you navigate to this site, googlecloud.quicklabs.com, you're going to sign up for an account. You're going to sign up for an account with the email that you use to attend this event. So once you sign up with the email and you create a password and sign into the account, you should be able to see the lab so that you can conduct it. So once you click the lab itself, it should take you to this particular screen that you're looking at on my left-hand side right here. Now, I also want to address for the individuals that may have joined late, or individuals that really just only came here for the lab portion itself and may not have had the opportunity to sign up for the event. Maybe they got a link from someone else. If you're looking to also do this lab, feel free to put your email in the chat down below. We're going to ensure that we add you to the platform. And then in the meantime, once you do that, we will also ask that you go to the googlecloud.quicklabs.com site and sign up for an account as well, so that the lab can show up for you. So we're going to have Q&A for this particular lab section. So if you have any questions during the lab, we'll make sure that we address them in the chat. But at a baseline, please navigate to googlecloud.quicklabs.com and sign up with the email you use to register for this event. So as you can see on my screen, I'm going to do the lab with you. So as you can see on my screen here, on the left-hand side, I actually have the lab. And then on the right-hand side, I actually have an incognito window that I've opened up. So when you log into the screen, if you have multiple screens, it would be a lot better for you to accomplish this lab. It'll be a little bit more seamless. You can actually do this on one monitor if you only have one, and that's perfectly fine, but you will most likely be flipping back and forth. But if you have two monitors, I would suggest doing this setup if you can. And if not, then that's perfectly fine. So on the left-hand side, I have a regular Google Chrome browser with the lab instructions themselves, right? So there's a Start Lab button. And on the right-hand side, I have an incognito tab that I'm going to use to build out my integration. So we're going to do this together. So before you click Start Lab, at a high level, we're going to follow the instructions on the left-hand side, and we're going to do all of our building for the environment on the right-hand side. So if I click the Start Lab button here, this Start Lab button is going to generate some credentials for me. This is going to generate an environment for me to access GCP and to be able to build out my application integration platform or integration for this particular use case we were just talking about. So I'm going to click the I am not a robot piece. And in that process, there is a couple of options. There's your open GCP console, there's your GCP project, your username, password, and your lab region. All of this information is going to be used in the lab itself. So you're going to open this link in the incognito. You're going to right click on this open GCP console, which I've already done. and it's going to automatically open up another tab for me on the right-hand side. And to sign into the platform itself, you're going to use your username and your password that we provided for you. So it already populated this student username for me. So if I click next, then the next piece here is the password. So I'm just going to simply copy this password. There's no concerns in regards to this password. These are just automatically generated. You're not going to be able to do anything with these credentials themselves. So I just wanted to ensure that anyone that's thinking about this from a security perspective understands there's no qualms or issues here. So I'm going to log into the platform. I'm going to click I understand. And I'm going to agree to the terms of service. So this gets me into the platform holistically as well. Now, a part of this process, we're going to go ahead and look at the instructions, and we're going to talk about part one of the integration itself, right? So in part one, as I mentioned before, it's going to briefly explain the lab objectives, which we just briefly went over. And then at a high level, there are different integration concepts that we have for the product itself are explained here. So as you're doing the lab itself, you can come back and forth and see some of the information that may not make sense. And you can get some high-level information in regards to the fundamental concepts themselves. But in part one, I'm going to go ahead and skip straight down to designing an integration. So we've already done all of these steps together. And I'm going to scroll to part one. Part one, design and create an integration. Now, to create an integration, we are now in the GCP console. And I'm going to navigate to application integration. So in the search bar here, I'm going to type in application integration, and you can see it pop up in the products pages as well. And I will close that burger menu. And this takes me to application integration in the GCP console. So as you can see at a high level, there's a couple of different things here in regards to the monitoring, the logs, the integrations themselves, which is where we're going to build, authentication profiles, depending on the service you're trying to connect to, and then the regions. So we're going to click integrations. And on step one, as you can clearly see here on the screen, there are already some integrations that were spun up for me. There's a phone order entry integration that was spun up, and an order entry integration. Both of these are going to use for your lab today. So in part one, we're going to do create an integration. So it's asking me to create one. It says create an integration. Now the integration name is going to be internet order entry. So I'm going to copy that real time with you. And then you're going to select the region. So as we saw at the top, my region was US East 1. The region may be different for you, but for me, it's going to be populated here, US East. Oh, go back here. We're going to do this once again. Internet order entry. And then we're going to click the US East 1 region, and we're going to click create. So now it has created an integration for me. So now I can move down to step 3. So step 3 says open the integration internet order entry, which we have done. And then we're going to select an API from the drop-down list, right? So we're going to select an API from the triggers list here as well, right? So we're going to pull this out. This is an API trigger. Okay. So you should see the API trigger on your integration design screen. So this is your console screen itself. And now we're going to add a variable, right? So we're going to click add a variable, right? So we're going to click this particular panel right here that toggles the variable screen. We're going to click that. And we're going to create a variable in step 5 called input. So we're going to do this together, input. And the data type is going to be a JSON. So we're going to click JSON. And then it says we're going to select infer from a sample JSON payload. Right, so the order information is 10,000, as I mentioned before. Right, so we're going to keep that in there, and we're going to copy that information with that button there, and we're going to copy it over here into the JSON schema options. Now, what's key here is you need to ensure that you use as an input to integration. This is key here because we want to ensure that this variable can be used for this integration that we're designing. Once you do that, you can simply click create. Right, so this is the creation step. And now I've created the input variable, and I can toggle this, and I know that this is the order ID information that I put into that variable. Now, the next portion of this is to add a task. So now we're going to click on the tasks, and we're going to look for connectors, as it mentions. So connectors. We're going to pull that to the screen. I'll close this window for now so I can follow the instructions. So we've dragged it to the integration designer. So now we have an API trigger and a connector. Now, on that particular connectors panel, if we click it again, or we can open this back up here as well, we're going to change the name of it to Save Internet Order to DB, right? So this is going to be the connector that's going to connect us to our particular database that we're going to save these orders into. So we're going to change the name here to Save Internet Order DB. And now we're going to configure the connector based on the steps here. So we're going to click Configure Connector. Now we're going to select the region from the drop-down list, which is the same region we had in the beginning of the lab. So I believe ours was US East 1, if I'm not mistaken. And I can validate that just in case. I believe it was US East 1. Yes, US East 1. So we'll go back to part 1. And next, the connection is going to be to Cloud MySQL. Now, as I mentioned for the lab itself, we've already gone ahead in the lab. We've spun up the Cloud MySQL database for you. So you're simply going to just choose the database itself here as a part of the lab. So you're going to click Cloud MySQL. You're going to click Next. And then we're going to click Entities. So this essentially means the objects in the connected application, which would be Cloud SQL. We're going to click Next. And then we're going to, for the entity, we're going to select Internet Orders, right? And the operation we're going to select is create. So being able to create internet orders, which ties in with our overall use case. So let's get next and done. Now that that's done, you can see all of the connection details at a high level for this particular connector. All right, so we're going to close this panel. And so you know that we have a connector that's saving those internet orders to the database downstream. Okay, so we're going to ensure that you drag the data mapper between the integration designer. So we're going to drag it in between the API trigger and the database connector. So we're going to pull this one down here on the screen. And then we're going to go to data mapping. So it's going to go to task. Let's type in data mapping. And we're going to pull the data mapper in between the API trigger and the connector that connects to the Cloud SQL database. The idea here is when the calls come in with the data or the JSON structure or the information that's coming into the integration, however it's triggered via an API call or manually, that data is going to go to the trigger. It's going to send it to the data mapper and map it to the appropriate data it needs to be in or format it needs to be in. And it sends it to the connector that's going to essentially save that internet order to the database. So number 10, as you can see here, we're going to modify the data mapper. So we're going to click that, or we're going to open up the panel here. And we're going to change the data mapper to a name called map input. All right. And then we're going to modify this data mapper as well. So this data mapper is how we map the variables that we previously created, or variables that you're going to create. So in step 11, you're going to see a list of variables populated. You don't see the list because it's closed. So make sure you click that toggle panel variable. You can see the variables that we already inputted into the platform. So we have an input variable. This doesn't showcase my entire screen holistically because, of course, I'm minimizing both screens. But if you actually have this one screen on a bigger screen, it probably would be more seamless for you. But in the concept of the lab itself, I'm doing it in this aspect. Now we're going to close that because I know the variables that are in my integration. And so as it says here, I'm going to select the input variable and I'm going to drag that to the input section. And then it says select the connector input payload. And we're going to drag that. I'm going to pull this screen over here and I'm going to drag that to my output section. Okay, so that's my connector input payload, right? So I'm taking that input, which is the JSON structure we created, or JSON data, and we're going to input that variable, and then the output is going to be stored in a connector input payload data mapper variable as well, right? A part of that process. All right, so now that that's complete, we're going to go to step 12. It's going to say close the data mapper editor. So just to validate, we have the input on the left-hand side, and we have the connector input on the payload on the right side. And we're going to close out the data mapper itself and go back to the integration screen. All right. Now, we're going to pull forks. As I mentioned before, if you want to understand what a fork is, you can simply go up to the top of the lab itself. It explains what a fork is, but essentially the fork is us being able to connect these particular tasks together via forks and joins and edges is what we call them. All right, so this fork, as you can see here that we created, this fork connects to the next task, which is our map input data mapper. Then we're going to also create another fork from the data mapper to the Save Internet Order DB connector that we have connected to our Cloud SQL database. So the lab, we look very similar in regards to that. Now we're going to test this integration manually. So there's a button at the top called Test. So let's go ahead and test this integration. So let's click Test. And as you can see, there's an execution deadline. We're simply just going to test this information with the JSON value. So we're going to put the order ID information in here. And let's test this integration. And integration execution succeeded. Now in step 14, we can view the logs itself, right? So let's go ahead and view those logs. And at a high level, make sure I close that. At a high level, this gives me all the information I need to know in regards to this integration execution, right? There's the integration name, the execution ID, the status, the start time, the end time, as well as the duration of the call. And if we open up the integration name itself, we can see every step of that flow. Right? We can see the request parameters, which was the input information with the JSON for $10,000. And then we can see that it hits the data mapper in the integration. And then it saves that order information to the Cloud SQL database that we had provisioned for the lab. Okay? So we can see all of those level of validations in step 15. Now, for step 16, we're going to view and modify the existing integration. So we're going to go back to the side navigation menu for integration. So we're going to click this. And so now you should have three. You should have an internet order entry that we just created. We also have a phone order entry and an order entry. So as it says in the lab, we're going to now open the phone order entry. So let's click that one. So at a high level, it looks very similar because in the overall flow, this is also storing phone information to the Cloud SQL database. So we're just going to test this one at a high level to ensure that this test is also working as well. So with that being said, it's already configured. Everything has been configured for you. And let's go ahead and test and ensure that this part of the flow also works. So we're going to take that order ID as well, and we're going to test it with the integration as well. Same process. So we got an integration execution succeeded. So this is acting as if there's a phone order being implemented for this particular architecture. And at a high level, you can see the same information. So we can see the logs in step 18. Okay. Now, in step 19, we're going to go back to the integrations menu. And we're going to click open the order entry integration. Now, the thought process behind this is these are sub integrations, and you're going to see in the order integration what I mean. But you have a main integration where you actually have the main workflow or the main business flow or business logic that you have in your integration. Then you also have sub integrations that handle minimal aspects of the main integration, right? So let's click the order entry integration, and it looks a little bit different. So as it explains that here as well. So this integration is the main integration calling the sub integrations based on the order type, right? So as you can see, this is the main integration, but in the platform, we're getting ready to configure this integration to support those various sub integrations depending on the orders that come into our main integration. So the first thing it says is to enable editing. So we're going to enable editing. We're going to simply click the skip button. In a real scenario or in an organization that has this platform, you of course would want to put a version label, but for the lab purposes, we're going to skip. And then we're going to move the integration designer so everything looks a lot cleaner. So in step 20, we're going to click on tasks and click for search call integration. So we're going to type that in, call integration. And we're going to take that call integration and we're going to put it down here next to the complete phone order. Right? So you can kind of already see inside of the main integration, we already have a call integration that's going, when the order is created, it's going to send that to the phone order sub integration that we were just looking at. So this call integration, we're going to add that to the integration designer, and we're going to make sure that it's parallel. So this looks a lot cleaner, and there is a button you can use to clean up the graph, and we'll look at that a little bit later. And so now we're going to modify this. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a fork, as it says here in the steps, coming from create order to this particular integration. So you're going to pull this line over here to that. And what I like to do is I'd like to spread this out for you, so it looks a little bit cleaner. Forgive me. I actually have something, and I'll put that there. So I like to pull this over a little bit. Okay, great. Now, on the left-hand side, I have the call integration that I just added, and on the right-hand side, I have a complete phone order. And so, as you can see in the steps, it says once done, click to join and change the task execution strategy to when all tasks succeed to when any tasks succeed. So if we click that, so click this little circle here, and we're going to change this from when all tasks succeed to when any task succeeds. And the thought process behind this is that we don't want when all of the tasks to succeed. We want any tasks, right? Basically, in that logic, it's basically saying that all of these have to be successful for this particular order to be published to the Cloud SQL database. We need to change that join to support when any tasks succeed. So if the order comes in and it goes through the integration, and as long as it makes it through this one, let's say hypothetically, then the rest of these will, of course, send this downstream to the this is going to be an internet order piece here. And it does explain that in the lab. So step 22, we're going to click this call integration task, and we're going to change the name. So we're going to change the name to complete internet order. And then for the API trigger ID, I would highly suggest copying this, right? So the API trigger ID is going to be for the internet order sub integration we were just looking at. So we can see in the sub integration details, we'll just go ahead and copy that in there. Okay. And then it says to select run a single integration. So we're going to click run a single integration, and we're going to select our internet order entry. So we'll go ahead and copy that as well. Okay. And then it says click add next to map sub integration inputs. So next to it, I'm sorry. So we're going to click add, and then we're going to select the variable task 6 connector output payload. So we're going to do that as well. So it should actually be here. You don't need to copy it. Connector output payload, and then we're going to select the input variable we created. So we're mapping the input to the sub integration itself. Give me a moment. And let's see, before we do that piece as well, I just want to ensure that we are on time for this. Okay, give me a moment. We're going to modify this again. So what we'll do is here we will let's see our sub integration. Let's check one thing real quick. We will copy this over as well. Give me one moment. See, it's being mentioned as well. I want to see if the input variable is actually being utilized in the internet order entry. So it's not published. So ensure that you also publish this sub integration. I can see what our problem is, why it wasn't mapping. So let's go back to the order entry integration, and we're going to go back inside of the lab itself, and we're going to modify this once again. So we're going to close this. Once again, we're going to do the trigger ID in step 22, and we're going to copy this once again. And you should see the internet order entry APIs here. So remember, ensure that you publish the integration, the internet order entry integration, because it's not going to show up as a sub integration. So forgive me in regards to that. So we're going to click run a single integration, and this is going to be your internet order entry. So it should pop up here as an option because now it is published. And then now we're going to follow the same steps. So sub integration input to map to input, which is the variable we had in the sub integration itself. And then we're going to have our execution strategy set to asynchronously. So let's change that. Okay. Now, the note here is, let's see what it's talking about. It's saying to test the complete phone order sub integration in a similar fashion. Right. So if you wanted to optionally in this portion of the lab, you can test the complete phone order. I'm not going to do that with the interest of time. But now we successfully have configured our complete internet order on the left-hand side of our main integration, right? So with that being said, we're going to go to step 23, I'm sorry. Step 23 is going to talk about creating edges, right? Or conditionals is what we talk about. So if you click this particular line right here, this yellow line I'm hovering over, we're going to click that. And we're going to create an edge from create order to the complete internet order that's publishing that order information to the Cloud SQL database. And I'm going to take this conditional information, right, internet. So if the product type that's put inside of that JSON payload has this particular string, has internet, I know that this is going to be an internet order, and I want it to route it to the Cloud SQL database. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to put that condition there as a condition. And then I'm going to name this condition internet order as the steps say. So now I have a condition called internet order. So when the orders come in, if it's an internet order and it meets this particular condition, route it to the Cloud SQL database with that information. And the sub integration we have looked at before is going to handle all. Okay, now with that being said, we can go ahead and test this integration. So let's click test, and we're going to click API trigger. You notice we have two because this integration has two triggers. We're going to do an API trigger test. And then at a baseline on step 25, we have different formatted information for you to utilize for the lab, right? So these different JSON payloads are going to test the overall integration itself. So there's a couple of things it's doing. It's looking for ID information. So as a telco organization, you may have specified that you want the ID, the card ID, you want the order amount, the customer ID, so we know which customer made this particular order, and the product type. So we're going to test the phone order first, even though we just configured the internet order. But let's test the phone order to ensure that it's working correctly. So we're going to copy that information here, and we're going to test the integration, and it succeeded. So if we view the logs real time, we can see that the order came into the platform, and we have some high-level information in regards to that order. And so downstream, once that order reaches the Cloud SQL database, you can imagine a warehouse or an organization that's waiting for those orders to come in to go ahead and start fulfilling those orders that have come into the Cloud SQL database if they have another tool that's able to watch the Cloud SQL database orders come in. So let's also go back and test the integration. So we're going to click back. Let's test the integration with the internet order, the one we just configured. All right, so same thing, same concept, but now we're ordering internet services. So we're acting as if we're a consumer or a customer ordering internet services. So test that integration, and it succeeded successfully. Let's view those logs. And high level, we get some information in regards to the order itself at every layer that we built inside of our integration, including the execution IDs and response parameters. High level information holistically. All right, with that being said, we're now on we actually have finished part one, actually. So that's great. Part one is completed. So this is the first part of part one where we have designed an integration at a baseline. And then in part two, we're going to talk about the advanced features. So we actually just finished part one. So before we go into part two real quick, before I go back into the other screen, I want to make sure that we address some of the pre-submitted questions. So the first question we had that was pre-submitted was, does application integration have a Salesforce connector? And we absolutely do. So Pramod, when he was doing his Gen AI demonstration, he did showcase Salesforce as an example with the Gen AI capabilities. But outside of using the Gen AI or Duet AI capabilities in application integration, you have the ability to, of course, configure Salesforce separately in the UI itself. So we do have a Salesforce connector. We do have a variety of other connectors that can work in line with Salesforce in a traditional sense. And once that's configured, of course, it's going to pull in all of the relative information in regards to the data mapping. Let's go to the next question. Oh, also, I did want to mention as well is we do actually have a community post on Google Cloud Community for Salesforce connectors with app integration. So if you have an opportunity, just go to Google, just type in Google Cloud Community application integration Salesforce, and you should see that community post. It has a good amount of views on it, showing you how to set up Salesforce in application integration. So let's go to the next question. Does application integration work with files? Absolutely. So as I mentioned before, when we started the discussion, there is actually a blog post as well for this as well, but the platform does work with files. So if you have a use case where you want to upload a file to a Google Cloud Storage bucket, or if you want to use SFTP or FTP, we do have those capabilities in application integration. And we do have a really great blog post with over 5,000 views that showcases how you can utilize that with application integration as well. So if you get a chance, just type it in on Google as well, Google Cloud Community, and look for that post. But at a baseline, we do work with files. Let me see if we have any other questions I can address in the chat before we go to part 2 real quick. For insight as well, for everyone that's still here, the next 3 parts of the lab are very short. The very first part was you building the integration holistically. So it took quite a bit of time. At a baseline, we're just going to test out some base capabilities there. And let me see if there's anything I can address. I feel like it looks like everyone else has been addressing them for me. So it looks like we're good to go. So let's go ahead and go into part 2. I'll switch over. Prabal, did you have anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to answer a couple of additional context to
go ahead.
Which were asked. I know we have been answering them as Chris was doing the lab. A couple of questions. One is, Laura, I basically had the API uploaded into API Hub, and API Hub has an ability to show up the Open API within the browser. That's what I basically used. API Hub is a offering which allows you to go and catalog all of those. And what in the demo, what it did is the Gen AI, instead of hallucinating, it actually went and understood, looked at all the APIs which it does, all the operations, all the schemas. Like order was an object. I did not go through the Open API. Order was a resource inside that Open API. I said order a meal from the restaurant, and restaurant was a path on it, and it actually went and took that as the recommendation. So how did the Open API get in? It was uploaded. There is an ability to use the UI to upload. There is a script to upload APIs into API Hub. That's how. And the way to view the API once an Open API, once it is uploaded, is you click on it, the actual Google Cloud Console opens up the Open API. Hopefully that answered. Please share if you have additional doubts. There are a couple of other questions around invoking integrations across projects. As shared application integration, the Google Cloud best practice, this is nothing specific to application integration, is always scope your assets to a particular project, right? So if you're working on it, all the assets, be it in terms of your RPG APIs, be it in terms of integration, be it in terms of your apps, be it running in, say, Cloud Run or GK, all are scoped. That's the best practice. We all also appreciate the fact that the best practice cannot be followed always, because there are always edge cases, all of it. So in your case, when you have to invoke an integration from another project, from an RPG, yes, you could do that through a service callout policy. The integration callout policy makes it a little more automated in terms of actually adding the service account and adding the actual endpoint. But given that an integration at the end of the day, if you have an API trigger, it's just an API call. So you could actually use a service callout policy with an RPG. And the only additional stuff which you need to do is you have to pass the service account. But it should work the same. The difference between the integration callout policy and service callout policy is just that service account population, which it does if it's in the same project behind the scenes. So that should actually help you. There is no limitation. Like you should be able to call any integration across projects if required. The second question was if in terms of actual how it is possible for various teams to work Of course, the application integration supports fine-grained role-based access control, which means that you could actually not just control who has access to the service, but also go to the level of who has access to this connection, who has access to this particular integration, who has access to go out and publish it, who has access to go out and invoke it. All of that, both design time as well as runtime, is all powered through standardized for simple control and governance through Google IAM. We released this capability in a couple of months back, or a month back, fine-grained role-based access control. That should help. We'll also share a textual response and the links to it so that you should be able to go and see documentation related to that. I guess we answered most of all the questions, if not this thing. So we can actually move on to lab 2, if that's okay, Chris.
Yeah, let's go to part 2. And like I mentioned, the next 3 parts are very, very short in stature. So let's go ahead. In part 2, we just finished part 1. We built out our baseline integration. Now in part 2, we're going to imagine that we are an integration developer. So imagine we are part of this telco organization, and our current workflow, our current integration that we created in part 1 as an organization is already in production. So I'm a developer at the telco organization, and currently the orders are already flowing into this production level integration that's published, right? So the orders as they come in, if they're an internet order, it goes to Cloud SQL. If it's a phone order, it goes to Cloud SQL. Now, me as an integration developer, one day my manager comes up to me and says, "Hey, Chris, we are already having a lot of success with the integration we have in production today. We would like for you to wait until the next change management process and implement some advanced features to this existing integration." And so a part of this lab on part 2, we're going to implement approval logic. And so the approval logic is essentially going to route the calls to this integration, if the orders themselves, to a manager or someone in the organization for approvals based on the conditionals that we add to the flow, right? And so as you can see in part 1, we're going to add this, in part 2, we're going to add this approval task to the screen. So let's go ahead and do that. For context, our approval logic is going to work in line here. So if the orders are greater than $10,000, we want to route that to a manager or managers for approval via email. If the order amount is less than $10,000, then it doesn't need any approvals. It's just going to route the call down to the appropriate product type to the Cloud SQL database. So let's go ahead and get straight into it. We're going to click the task button at the top, as I mentioned in the lab. We're going to click approval, and we're going to pull the approval task in between both of the existing sub-integrations. Okay. Now the next portion of that, as it mentions, is to put that in between them. Next, we're going to pull a fork from create order to the approval task, right? So the flow or the integration itself should look kind of like this. It does that as well in the lab. Mine's not perfect, but it should look just like this. And so now we have an edge here. Now we need to add the conditional information for the edge. So let's go ahead and add the manager approval. So there's the label, manager approval, and let's add the conditional. And if we look at this conditional, it's basically saying if the order amount information in the JSON is greater or equal to $10,000, then we want to route this to the manager that's configured on this approval task. If it's less than $10,000, then route it according to the product type. Okay. So now we're going to go to the next piece. We're going to actually go to step 8, and we're going to configure the approval task itself. Now, for context, please ensure that you use a personal email or an email you have access to. It clearly outlines as well in the lab is to not use anything for quicklabs.net, which is an email that's pre-provisioned with this platform. It's not going to work. We have routing there. It's not going to allow you to do anything in regards to that. So please use a valid email address that you have access to, or your corporate email if you have access. And for the context of this lab, I'm going to click the approval task, and I'm going to add one that I already have. So I'm going to type mine in. And gmail.com. And I'm going to add, so right here is the valid email address. You're going to modify that in the approval task. And the custom notification message, we're going to copy this. So this says, hello, please review this order information and approve at your earliest convenience. So we're going to add that here in the string section. And you can make some changes to the reminder frequency. I wouldn't. In the concept of this lab, we're just going to modify the recipient and the custom notification message. Okay. Now, the next portion of this, we're going to tie this into identity and access management. Now, what's key about most Google Cloud solutions, if not every Google Cloud solutions, I won't say most, all Google Cloud solutions, they're tied into identity and access management. You want to have role-based access controls in these solutions to be able to prevent individuals in your organization from just being able to do anything to your platform. So to be able to be an approver inside of our telco organization in our GCP environment, you have to have the appropriate permissions. So as you can see here in step 9, we're going to take this console.cloud.google.com, and we're going to open this in the incognito browser. So right click on that and open that link. So this is going to take us to the GCP console. Okay, so we still have our integration open in this panel, and we're going to do our identity and access management piece. Now, as it mentions in the steps, in step 10, take note of your project ID. So if you click this drop down right here, this is your project ID. So we're going to copy that. I'm going to copy this to a notepad, and I already currently have it, but I'm going to go ahead and copy this for your instance, but make sure that you copy this down somewhere. So if you have a notepad on your workstation, or if you have a piece of paper, this is going to be key because you're going to use this information for later on in the lab. Okay. And now, remember the email address that you used. Now, let's go back here and we're going to click cancel. And there's going to be a Cloud Shell button it's going to ask in step 11. So let's click the Cloud Shell. So it's going to ask you to continue, just like it says in step 12. Click continue. And we're going to open up a little bit more. And so now we're going to, in step 13, we're going to create some we're going to create some variables, right? So as you can see here, this is just a placeholder, and we're going to replace this project ID with the information from the lab, right? So we're going to the export Google Cloud _project. So if we put that here, and we can modify this, we're going to paste that into the screen, and we're going to erase all the way to the equal sign. And as I said before, this is our project ID. So copy that, and you're going to paste that into the screen. So if we take a look at this before I press enter, this is going to create a variable called Google Cloud Project that's going to store this information for my project ID. So we're going to click enter. So now if I do an echo and I do a Google Cloud Project, if I click that, I should be able to see the correct project ID that matches at the top that we just looked at, right? So I know that worked successfully. Let's look at number 14. Number 14 says student email. So we're going to do the same thing as well for the student email. So we're going to do an export. It's using the Google Cloud Project variable, which ties to this particular project. And it's also utilizing the student email, which is tied to the recipient that we added, right? And this is going to give them the role integrations suspension resolver. So let's click enter. It's going to ask me to authorize again. So we're going to authorize that. And done. So at a baseline, all of this information here is just showing you that it's binding that particular role to that account. So if we look in here, you should be able to see the role that was added in the platform. We're going to look shortly. So we have to do one more thing. On step 17, we're now going to add also another role to that recipient, Apogee Integration Viewer role. Okay, so you're just simply going to copy and run this again. What I like to do is I'd clear the screen, just right clear, and same thing. So we're going to run this again, and this is going to give us a different role, the Apogee Integrations Viewer role, to view the integration as well. So imagine a use case that this manager isn't a developer. At a baseline, they shouldn't have the ability to also come into the integration platform, not only approve it, but they can make changes to it. No, we want to ensure that they can only view the integration and just approve it based on their own level of review. So let's click enter. And that successfully has worked as well. So as you can see, we got this same output. You should also get the same output. So we're going to clear the screen. Now in step 18, let's validate that this has worked successfully. So we're now going to navigate to the hamburger bar at the top, and you're going to go down to Identity and Access Management, and you're going to click IAM. And in the concepts, in the process of this, you can actually close Cloud Shell. So let's close Cloud Shell because there's a lot of information that can be confusing to look at. And in step 19, we need to validate that these particular permissions were added correctly. So as you can see here on the screen, my email, chrisappdemo@gmail.com. I also have both those roles, the Apogee Integration Viewer role and the Application Integration Approver role. So that works successfully. Now, that's good. So that means that this recipient is going to be the individual in my organization hierarchy that's going to be able to approve this integration. Now, step 20, we're going to go back to the order entry integration. We're going to test. Okay, so go back to step 20. We're going to click publish and test. So we need to publish this integration. This is publishing it, and this is going to this is going to publish it. So you can see that screen, or the color of it turns green because now it's published. So we're on version 2. This is your versioning. So now this is fully published. It also says that the version is currently active. Editing features are disabled unless you click edit to edit the next version of it. Now we're going to go to step 21. Step 21 is we're going to test it. So we're going to click test. And we're going to click API trigger as it mentions. And we're going to copy this information. Same thing as before. But this time, if you notice, the order amount is $10,000. Remember, so inside of our integration flow, we configured if it's greater or equal to $10,000, we want this to be routed to our recipient. So let's test the integration. All right, so it's succeeded. Now in the logs, in step 22, you're going to notice something a little bit different compared to the logs that we looked at before. You see a suspended icon, right? So we're going to open this up. And as we can see, that if a customer made a call, which we acted as the customer, it routed it through the integration with the order information. It went to the create order, and then it got to the approval task, and it got suspended, right? It got suspended because the information that we sent in equaled that particular conditional. So if at this point in time in step 23, keep this screen open, you're going to take the time to look at your email that you used as the recipient. So you should be able to look in your email, and you should see an email. So this step in step 23 and 24 is going to highlight that. So you would sign into your email, and you should see an email for step 25 that looks like this, something very similar. It should say something action required, please resolve an approval request. So I'm going to do that on my end. I'm not going to show my screen there, but on my end, I have that email, and I'm going to click approve. So that blue arrow there on step 25, it should show an approve button. Go ahead and click that approval. And I'm doing that real time. You're going to agree to your terms of service when you click that, and you're going to click approve or reject. Now, if you click reject, you're going to see in the logs reflected in correctly. You should be able to press approve, click approve. It's going to load, and it's going to say approval status has changed. Now we're simply going to approve it like it shows in step 26. This is exactly what the email is going to look like for you in that email. And it should say approval request approved. Okay, I just did this on my end, but also do it on your end momentarily. And so we're going to click the refresh logs button. So I kept this screen open personally, but some of you may have closed the screen. It's going to tell you to just navigate back into the console. I'm going to click refresh. So you can see the suspend. Let's click refresh, and you can see that it's now succeeded because I actually approved the request itself. The approval came through. As you can see here, it is approved. It's set to true. And we're good to go for the advanced features piece right there for that particular approval task. So we can see that it's been approved successfully. The corresponding provisioning system itself. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to also modify these conditions that we have. So let's go ahead and go into the next portion of this as you are also doing that piece. So I'm going to click the internet order edge here, and I'm going to change the conditional. So let's change it to this one. So I'm going to copy and paste. Didn't copy successfully. Oh, I actually need to edit this. So ensure that you click enable editing, and I'm sure it says that, yes. Enable editing. So we're going to skip. And we're going to come back, and then we're going to change this conditional. So now our product type is internet, and the order amount is less than $10,000, right? So we're looking for two things. We're looking for the product type and the order amount. And then we're also going to scroll down and do this for the phone order as well, right? So we're going to close this one. And for the phone order, we're going to click the phone order. Phone order. And we're going to change the phone order as well. So let's copy this. Same thing for the phone order. And we're going to close that edge. Okay. And step 4, now that we've done that successfully, Step 5, we need to create 2 forks from the approval task, right? So with that being said, now we're going to come right here on step 5, and we're going to pull these forks over the complete order. And so let's make sure that that's correct. Actually, I'm going to delete that. Let's make sure we do this correctly. It should be to the yes. So you're just going to pull these over here to the top. All right. So it's going to look just like the screen here. So you can see that I've pulled the edges to each order at the top as well, right? So when that approval logic comes through, then it's going to route it again. So once the approval is done successfully, then we're going to route the calls to the Cloud SQL database. So this is going to ask us to clean up the graph, so we can do that as well. Sometimes it makes it look kind of weird. I'm going to clean it up by myself, and I'm going to pull the approval task down here. So now it kind of looks like what the lab is looking for instead. So now in step 7, we're going to configure these edges as well, right? Because we want to do the approval, and then we want to have conditionals to ensure that it goes to the complete phone order back on task, right? We don't want it to just approve and then send it. We may want to have a conditional here. So we want to still validate that information. So we can click that edge, and we're going to click product type. So we're going to copy that. So we're going to name this label product type internet, and we're going to do a conditional here. So we're going to move the conditions that we had before. So we have a condition there for product type and internet. And we're going to do the same thing for phone. So we're going to click this yellow edge right here after the approval has been done and do the same thing. Okay. That's done. And on step 9, we are done with the integration design itself, right? This is the complete integration. It should look exactly similar. Mine looks a little bit smaller. And so you can optionally test this if you would like. You don't have to test this, but you can test this. You would just go back up to step 20. So step 20 would be here, all the way back up to step 20. Right here in 20 and 21, you would click test API trigger, and we can test this again, which we can do real time if you would like. So we're going to publish and test it once again. And we can test this information real time and do the approval if we would like to. In the interest of time, we're not going to do that. But this, of course, this flow will essentially send the approval email once again. But this time we have some more conditionals after the approval has been met. So let's make sure that we're back on task with that. So let's scroll back down. This is the optional piece. And with part 2, we've done some advanced features into the platform. Okay. So it looks like give me one moment. So it looks like we just finished part 2. We are going to go straight into the next questions part of that. So we just finished part 2. And so part 2, of course, worked in line with those advanced features. Part 3, we're going to address some error handling capabilities. But before I switch screens, let's answer some of the questions that we had. So there was a question in regards to CI/CD and how it works with application integration. So like most applications, your software development lifecycle can be mapped to this particular solution in GCP. So when you're building out your integration, project, you can build out different application integration projects based on your software development lifecycle that works in line for the organization you work for. A part of that is we also have a Google Cloud community post by one of the Googlers here on our team, by Manoj. It's a really good CI/CD Google Cloud community post. It really highlights how to build out your SDLC with application integration and utilizing some CI/CD pipeline tooling with application integration to publish and upload, create, delete, and do some of the basic CRUD operations with your CI/CD pipeline and do that real time and tie that into your production work stack. So if you get an opportunity, feel free to go ahead and look at the Google Cloud community and look at that post. It's really good. It's got a lot of views as well. For the next question, can I connect with my SAP directly without using service call out and sign messages with Apogee? Absolutely. Right. Like as Pramod talked about before, in Apogee, our API management solution, we do have policy called service call out and assign message. They do two different things, but the service call out can call out to the integration in that aspect. And a higher degree, we're going to answer the question. I think that we have another question in regards to Apigee and application integration working together. But with those two solutions, you can actually use an Apigee in front of application integration and have those integration calls there. But you don't have to necessarily use Apigee to connect to SAP. You can use application integration in a standalone fashion and use a connector to connect to SAP and build your integration in that aspect as well. In a broader use case, Apigee is going to be there for some more of the capabilities that you want to add on top of that, and being able to publish your integrations externally if you wanted to do an API productization play. But we can talk about that because I know we have another question coming up that someone asked as a pre-submitted question. So I'll answer that one in the coming section. With that being said, it looks like our questions have been answered. And we can go ahead and go into part 3. So part 3 and 4, very short. Part 3, once I said, is going to be error handling. So let's go ahead and switch over there. Part 3, we just finished part 2. Part 3 is really going to just highlight some of the error handling capabilities in the product itself. And so what that essentially means is, imagine if you start facing errors randomly in your integration, you want to be able to have retry logic. Of course, in a production scenario where you can continually retry to publish those orders. We don't want it to just completely error out, and in production, we're not able to publish any orders. We want the retry logic to keep trying to publish those orders, just in case the infrastructure is being spun up. There's some level of automation that's happening, anything in that particular instance, so that we can protect our production workflow from executing successfully. So with that being said, we have different types of retry logic. So we have for synchronous executions and asynchronous executions. There's retry logic and error handling strategies that you can implement in application integration here. Okay. So with that being said, let's go ahead and do part 3. So it's telling us to navigate to the order entry integration. We still have it open from part 2. And now it says select the create order task. So we're going to select the create order task. Expand the error handling section. So let's go ahead and open that up, and let's go ahead and go down here. And step 4 is asking us to change this information, right? So for the strategy for synchronous executions, we're going to go ahead and click none. And then for the strategy for asynchronous executions, we're going to change that to retry task with linear back off. And it should already be, it may potentially be on exponential back off for you, but ensure that it says linear back off. And then the retry interval needs to be 3 seconds, so we're not going to change that. And the maximum retry count should be 5. So with that being said, with this configuration, it's essentially going to show you how it handles the retry logic, right? So if the integration itself is invoked synchronously, and the create order task fails to execute, that's when the retry logic is going to implement. But if it's invoked asynchronously, which is what we configured on this create order task itself, asynchronously, it's going to keep continuing to retry that particular create order task in this particular interval as it's described in the lab. So let's test this out. We're going to pretend as if we're having a MySQL outage with this particular connector. So we're going to go to the integration connector screen in the GCP console. So if we go to, what you could do is you can just do a right click on the Google Cloud logo and open another console. We're going to type in integration connectors. I already have it, it pops up here, but type in integration connectors and click integration connectors. And it's saying to go to connections. And we're going to, as you can see here, we already have I see this is blocking my screen. We have a Cloud MySQL connector that's spun up for you for the lab. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to suspend this, right? So how we can suspend it, we're not going to delete it. We're going to go to the connector itself, and we're going to click suspend. All right, so click suspend, click confirm, right? So this is going to stop our connection to the Cloud SQL database. And we've done that, so now it says inactive. And so now we need to test the integration synchronously. So let's go back to our order entry integration. We're going to click that test button, API trigger. Yes, we're going to publish and test. If you're not already published, ensure that's the case. And we're going to test with this output here. Let's test this. Okay, so the integration execution failed, which is as expected because we suspended the connection to the Cloud MySQL database. Forgive me. So we tested the integration, and now let's go ahead and view the logs. And it failed, which is it's expected, right? So let's look at the trigger ID fields, as it mentions in the lab. The lab says we need to look at the trigger ID fields. So this is the trigger ID, the order entry _ API 1, and we can see the duration, 0.443 seconds. Now when you expand the log entry, you can expand them even more if we would like to, which we've already done. And so we can see the first attempt that was here. This is the first attempt, and it failed, and it stopped, right? It attempted to create it, and it did not work. Now, let's test it asynchronously, because we know that we configured the create order task with asynchronous configurations. So we can test it asynchronously by using the REST API. So we're going to take note of our project name once again, our project name. And let's see, if you don't have Cloud Shell open already in GCP console, click the Cloud Shell button. So we're going to click Cloud Shell. Okay, so let's open Cloud Shell. And remember, our region from the lab that was spun up should be at the top of your screen. So we're going to go ahead and create some more variables again, right? So we're going to copy this one to the screen. So this is asking me to input my integration region. I know that for my lab, it's US East 1, US East 1, and then I'm going to click enter. And if I want to validate this once again, I can do an echo Google Cloud region, and I have it US East 1. Step 4, Google Cloud project, which should still be the same, which we can validate if we do, I think the former commands in here, Google Cloud project. It's still here. Now these are temporary variables, so when you close this off, when you close this, it's going to get rid of them. But since this session is still in persistence, oh, actually it still has persistent session. It's just to have the information that we set before. So there's a certain time before it actually erases inside of the spun up VM with Cloud Shell. But with that being said, we still have the Google Cloud project set. But if it's not set for you, go ahead and set it again. Just do another export with Google Cloud project and put your project ID there as well, or your project name. So this one's saying project name. So let's do that correctly. Not project ID. So this is my project name. But with that being said, my project name is actually the same name as my project ID. So there's no difference in regards to that. Now, so they invoke the order entry integration asynchronously by executing the following command, right? So we're going to do a curl command inside of Cloud Shell. So let's go ahead and back out of here. And we're going to, so this is currently published, we're going to run this curl command in the shell. So let's go ahead and copy this, and I should be able to run this. I'm going to click a space bar and just take a quick look at it as well, what it's doing. It's generating some authentication credentials, and it's going to hit the order entry API, which is the trigger ID that corresponds to this particular integration. And then it's going to do the JSON values in a curl command call. So let's do that. And it's going to ask me to authorize. All right. And so as that's running, I got some execution info IDs, as it notices on the screen here. Yours is going to be different, but this is the output of mine. So this is me essentially running a curl command call in Cloud Shell, trying to hit this particular integration by its trigger ID. That's how I would find it. So let's go ahead and look at the logs. So if I go ahead and look at the order entry integration logs themselves, we should be able to see some high-level information. So you go to the button up there. So you can see here in my logs, and you should see this in your logs as well, that there's quite a bit of retries going on, right? So you can see that if we follow this correctly, you can see the log entries showing multiple attempts, right, to make these calls, right? And so the first attempt was successful, it failed, and then I did a retry on hold. And so you can see that it's continually to try to do the retry logic based on that to eventually succeed. So at a baseline, you can see we have multiple calls happening here based on the asynchronous configurations we made for part 3. And this is very similar if you do this with the synchronous configurations as well. So with that being said, we should be good to go for part 3. So I'll close out my Cloud Shell, and we should be able to go into part 4. All right, great. So with part 4, well, now that we finished part 3, we're going to go into part 4. Very short section of the lab. We're at the very tail end of the lab, but let's answer 2 more questions before we finish. So what are some use cases for Apogee and application integration together? There are a lot of different use cases. There are a lot of things that Apogee does very, very well from an API management perspective, and working in tandem with application integration, being able to connect to different data sources depending on the use case. One of the key use cases I would want to highlight is the ability to productize your APIs and have them work in line with application integration to reach out to different data sources. So you can imagine a use case where you have application integration configured to connect to a system of record downstream. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be a data warehouse. It could be a BigQuery. It can be any type of solution in regards to that, and having application integration connect to it. And then having Apogee have a proxy configured to call that integration based on the API calls that come into the API management platform. What a good use case with that is being able to, of course, productize those APIs to those particular data sources through application integration, and publishing those products to your developer portal so that partners or internal developers inside of your organization or individuals outside of your organization can actually go to that portal and consume those services for their particular workflows in their organization. So they can say, hey, your organization uses a really cool service that we really like. We don't want to build it ourselves. Can we come to your organization and utilize those services in our development streams as well? So being able to productize is one of the key capabilities there. There's a lot of things that Apogee does very, very well at a bigger scale in regards to rate limiting and quota and monetization. So being able to create a revenue channel may be another catalyst or another idea that could be working in line for this particular use case. So we do have customers today that are doing that at scale. Let's go to the next question. Security controls. So what are some of the security controls in application integration? There are a variety of security controls. So as we already mentioned earlier in the lab, we have role-based access controls that you've already implemented in the lab itself. So we have it tied into identity and access management for role-based for RBAC. Then we also have controls in regards to encryption, where if you want to encrypt your data with application integration, you can use Google managed encryption keys or customer managed encryption keys if you don't want to use a Google managed one. We also have capabilities in regards to VPC level service controls. So if you wanted to create a service perimeter around application integration as it's deployed in Google Cloud, you can absolutely do that to prevent any services from being able to access your integrations from an external perspective or even inside of GCP. And then we also have capabilities in regards to security guidelines. So in our documentation, if you get a chance, our security guidelines are in there as well that are going to pretty much address some of those questions in various areas. So there's a lot of different security controls, even from a networking perspective. If you wanted to set up privatized connectivity from your integration to a service, maybe in your on-premise environment. Let's say you have an Oracle database deployed on-premise. You can set up a privatized connectivity from your integration to that particular service or that system of record. So with that being said, we're going into the part 4, the last piece of the lab, very straightforward. And then after that, we're going to talk about some resources that you can have and use to actually test out this platform yourself from our free tier and some other things that I want to share with you. So let's go ahead and go into the next portion. So in part 4, we're going to explore the integration operations piece, right? So these are some of the capabilities that come with our integration platform. We've been building out parts 1, 2, and 3. And part 4 is really just us holistically looking at the integration, the operation capabilities that we have in the product, right? So for this particular piece, we're going to go to the application integration console again. So if you have an opportunity, just navigate back from the order entry integration we were just in, and we're going to go back to the page here, and you can actually just go to monitoring, right? So with the lab itself, we're going to go to monitoring, and at a high level, this is all the information that we can see in the platform, right? And so for step 4 in the lab, it's saying we can filter down to the integration, the order entry integration. And we can see all of the total successful calls that happen to this particular integration, total failed, total successful, total unsuccessful, the integration data itself, and some more high-level information in regards to the failures, the average integration execution time. And you can actually filter down with the ranges of the days, right? So it says here on the lab for 30 days. Okay, and we can see that information. Now, all of this information is very helpful and beneficial. What's also beneficial is the logs. So in the lab, it also mentioned for us to go into the logs piece of it for part 4. And at a high level, the execution logs, these are all the execution logs for our lab today we've been doing together for all the parts. So we get all that information at a high level. And you can see everything that pertains to each piece of those logs. And we can go to the next page. I believe we didn't have that many for the lab itself, but there's quite a few things going on here. So we know that every step of the lab is all being collected and filtered here based on the region. And so you can actually just filter as well. So you can actually filter by the integration name. So if we type in integration, or actually it pops up for you, integration name. If we type in order entry and we click enter, this should pull up all the integration or integration logs for the order entry integration. And we can filter. And we want to do a select status of fail, right? So let's do status, execution status, and we'll say failed. And so this drills down and lets us know these are the 2 that failed. So very, very good in regards to queries or filtering out. So we also are going to do the download and upload of an integration. So if we go back to integrations here, this is the process of being able to download these integrations that you've created in the platform and being able to upload them so that you don't have to create an integration from scratch. So as I mentioned before in the sections of the lab, there is versioning tied to each one of your integrations as you edit them and modify them. In the lab, it's asking us to download and upload the integrations. So if we go into the order entry integration, we can see some of the versioning information. And so versioning, this is your version control system. So when you're modifying the integrations, you can go back to a recently published version that you had when you were modifying it at first, compared to the most current version that's in the platform. With this, it's asking us in this particular section to download the integration. So we're going to go to these 3 yellow dots. Sorry, this is the wrong one. I apologize. Go to these dots here for more actions. Next, let me close the variables panel. And we're going to click the download button. So let's download the integration itself. The order entry, I'm going to modify that before, and we'll replace it because I might have another one from another lab. And then on the left side is asking us to go back to integrations, and it wants us to create one. So we're going to create one, and we're going to name it test integration. Integration. You can name it anything you would like. We're going to select the region, and we're going to click create. And close the variables panel, and it's asking us to upload it. So we're going to click the 3 dots. We're going to click upload, and we're going to upload that order entry integration. It should be a JSON file, as it showcases that as well here. It should be a JSON file. So that being said, within a matter of seconds, I was able to create a new integration that I didn't have to create from scratch based off an existing one. So this is very powerful. Optionally, we did all of this in the UI with the lab, but optionally, you can also do this with the public API. So the steps inside of the lab here will show you how to do this, on how to download the integrations or your existing integrations with the API if you want to go through those steps as well. And the concept of, in the aspect of time, I'm not going to do that, but the steps at a high level are very straightforward. So this is going to be how to use the public API we have. So our public API for application integration is integrations.googleapis.com. And you can see here there's a couple of fields that need to be implemented here to be able to download that integration. So if you can follow those steps. You can also publish that integration with the public API as well, right? So part of the lab steps as well is how you can publish that with the particular version that you want to publish based on the one you downloaded from before. But with that being said, we are now finished with part 4, and we are actually finished with the entire lab in its entirety. So I want to thank you all for giving me your time here. we're still going to support you in the Q&A section. So Purnima, myself, Austin, and Pramod are going to continue to be in the Q&A. This is going to be live in regards to that. So if you have any questions in regards to your lab itself, let us know. We're going to ensure that we answer all the questions. Your lab, once it's ended, all of that infrastructure will be reclaimed. So try to get the lab done in the time that you do have it. And if not, that's perfectly fine. We're going to make sure that we showcase on the slide that we're going to share again some of the resources we have if you want to try this on your own, try this in your own time. And we do also do these events monthly. Okay, and we're going to talk about that shortly. So thank you for this particular portion of the lab. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you, Austin. Actually, I'm actually gonna continue talking, right? So this was a really great lab. I want to answer 2 more questions, and then I'm gonna share the resources with you. So the first question is, does application integration have an API? I actually just answered that question. Integration.googleapis.com, absolutely, it can be utilized. If you don't want to use the UI and the low code intuitive drag and drop, you don't have to. The next question we had, can I try application integration on a trial basis? Absolutely. If you go to our, if you actually go to the documentation for the solution or the product, just go to Google Cloud, type in application integration pricing. We actually have a free tier. So everyone that's here, if you have an opportunity, you can absolutely try this solution for free. You get up to 400 integration executions for free. Okay. So after the 400 executions, you're going to get charged from a pay-as-you-go perspective. Okay, so if you wanted to actually test this capability in your own free time, because I know you may not have had the time to do the lab today and you just wanted to watch this live stream, take the time, get your team together or put some time on your calendar. You can absolutely try this solution for free in the free trial in your own free time. And you get 400 free integration executions per month, and you get up to 20 gigs of data process per month for our solution itself. Also, you get up to 2 free connections, two free Google connections, right? So our Google services in that free trial, you can also connect to 2 of those for free in the free trial itself. So if you have an opportunity, take the chance, do the free trial, play around with the platform, and reach out to our team so we can talk about some more advanced use cases you may have, or if you have some basic use cases or some connectors that may not be on the roadmap right now, we can talk about some of the ones that are on the roadmap so that we can work along with your organization. With that being said, solutions-wise or resources-wise, I'm sorry, we have code samples and we have documentation and we have our integration community, right? So if you have an opportunity, please look at our code samples. We do have some code samples published to our GitHub. Also, we have code samples that are published in the documentation so you can see some high-level use cases of application integration outside of this lab, right? Because this lab was just, it's a pre-built use case. Your organization may have a different use case that's a lot broader, a lot more specific and fine-grained for a similar situation. So we have some great code samples. We have the integration community. So if you type Google Cloud Community application integration, you should be able to have access to our community page where myself and all the other Googlers here that support that particular product can answer any of your questions whenever you have those questions. And also, just as I mentioned before, take a look at our documentation. There's a lot of quick starts. Try the free trial. We also have an e-com processing lab. It's not a lab, an e-com processing it's a mini lab inside of our documentation that can be used with your free trial. So try that out as well. So if you have an opportunity, feel free to reach out to us and the team. We really appreciate you all joining. We also really appreciate the people that stayed, even the people that left in the interest of time for the things they had going on in their day-to-day. We just appreciate the opportunity to showcase the product, answer any relevant questions. And if you have any more questions, please feel free to put them in the chat while we're all here to answer that. Lastly, Pramod and Austin, I really appreciate you working with me here, and Purnima and Google and all the Googlers. The Gen AI capabilities. Pramod, did you want to say anything else for the Gen AI demo we did a little bit earlier in the call? Or Duet AI?
Yeah. As I shared in the demo, this is just a starting point. We have many more things in the roadmap, which you will see coming out early next year itself, not long time. Beyond what I just now showcased. Imagine how we talked about, there are a couple of questions around, do I have a connector for X? Do I have a connector for Y? That's how the entire market was shaped, looking into the iPaaS story, right? Think about how Gen AI is going to transform this. That's what we are working on. Why do you need to depend upon a vendor to actually have a connector? Or even if you can build, like many of the vendor others actually can support building a connector, but how could you actually go beyond a connector to an outcome based connection? You come into with a use case in your mind, right? You want to automate order, or you want to actually update a ticket. You don't need to go into technology saying, oh, do I have a connector, what is the object? That's where the power of Gen AI is going to come. That's all we are working on. So stay tuned. This is completely going to revolutionize, and we are here to disrupt how the integration and automation was done for ages, with Google's strength in terms of deep research and infrastructure with respect to AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Keep going, Fred. Do you have anything else? I think we're good. Do we want to mention the trusted tester? Did we mention that already as well?
We mentioned there is a link for the trusted tester as well, already pasted above in the chat. Possibly we'll try and share that again. You should be able to log in, register. Very, very keen to get your feedback. If you are available, we will try and set up a one-on-one session with you to get your thoughts and feedback. You shape what we are actually going and developing, right? Be it in terms of the connectivity roadmap, be it in terms of the actual Gen AI, all of the aspects. It's like, you please share your input so that we could actually go and shape the product to work for you. There is one. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, go ahead, Pramod. Feel free.
No, I'm just gonna ask you. You may have something in your mind aligned, Chris. I'm just gonna pick one question so folks are told. Please, this is possibly for the next few minutes. Don't want to hold for long. Let's take some answers. If you have more questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. We will try and answer them live. Yeah, the question came from Roman. Is it possible to provision integrations via Terraform? There are two aspects, Roman, in terms of when you say provisioning. One is you could provisioning the connector, which is the infrastructure. Like you can actually have a connector provisioned and then use the same connection across various integration flows. Yes, that is going to be available as Terraform scripts starting this quarter, hopefully by end of this month. I know I'm sharing roadmap in this call, but subject to all terms, it should be available this thing. In terms of provisioning integration itself, typically if you have experienced outside of Quick Labs, you could go and provision an integration right now through the UI. It should take less than 20 seconds to actually get it provisioned. But with that said, we do have an API. We have customers who have wrapped that API into a Terraform script and are actually calling provision and deprovision. We are looking to even provide a first-class support through a Terraform plugin for provisioning and deprovisioning application integration as well moving forward. But you should not be blocked by it, because we have customers who use that our existing API. If you remember, Chris talked about, does application integration have APIs? Yes, you can have an API to go and provision and deprovision. All you do is put a script block inside your Terraform, and you should be able to do it. We are looking at how to take that to the next level by providing a Terraform plugin for that itself. Any additional? Sorry, Chris, if you had
No.
to add, please go ahead.
No, that's perfect. No. So if there are any extra questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll wait another minute. But yeah, as I mentioned, we just really appreciate you all joining to see the platform. The product itself is growing at an exponential rate. We have a lot of customers interested in it. And so we're just truly appreciative for everyone that joined today to see these capabilities front and center. And AI is a hot topic. So I know that demo was probably very appreciated, Pramod. So we appreciate that.
As folks are slightly last 30 seconds to think for your questions, I will add one thing around AI. You saw that the power of Gen AI is good within to improve your productivity. One thing which I did not showcase, which you can actually try it out right now, is the ability to use Gen AI within your automation process. Like imagine that you are actually automating your process for say ticket management, and you want to automatically use a model which Google has in its model garden, or your own custom enterprise built model as part of your flow to go and respond to that ticket. Like I raise a ticket saying my refrigerator is not working. How could it be send out an automated response personalized for me, knowing my background, all of that, for which you need Gen AI, which could be an enterprise built model, or which could be a model which is actually built available through application through Model Garden and Vertex. You could actually call that with an application integration with no code, right? You could actually go and drop. We have a pre-built task called as a Vertex call, and you could actually go and drop that and make your call to your AI models to actually make your process much more intelligent. So it's both ways. That's what we are infusing Gen AI to make it easy for you to use, better improve your productivity, efficiency, all of that. In parallel, you can also make it your processes much more intelligent by actually has the ability to invoke LLM models through the integration. So that's what I call as AI squared. But with that said, Chris, any final closing comment? Thanks, and we can.
Yeah. Once again, my last thing is try the free trial. Try the product out. Free trial, free 400 executions for the free trial. Please go to the documentation, see some of our code samples, see some of the things that we're all working on. We're just appreciated once again. So thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. We're going to have these. We keep having these events monthly, so be on the lookout for the next event. All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.